Hey, how's it going, everybody? So, I have a review for you today of a new monitor that I've picked up. It's the Acer Predator 43-inch display. It's a pretty nice display. The exact model is the CG437K. So it's a pretty expensive monitor. It's about $1,000, but it's also pretty high end. I know NVIDIA just announced their support for 360 hertz monitors, but this monitor is 144 hertz. So at the time of me purchasing this monitor, it was one of the highest end monitors that you could buy. And now when I went and looked at some of the reviews from other really popular reviewers, they had some criticisms that I don't really agree with or understand why they had those criticisms. One of the criticisms that that they had was the fact that the monitor is it's basically a regular monitor. It's not ultra wide, it's not 21:9, it's not, you know, a CRT monitor or whatever. It's just a TV monitor. It's like the size of a smaller TV. Well, smaller TV nowadays. I remember when I got a TV 5-10 years ago, this would have been, you know, a great size TV, maybe 5 inches larger, 47-inch. I think what I had, an old LG not smart TV. Yeah, but as far, I just wanted to go over the reasons why I think that this monitor is actually the perfect size. If you're using your computer all the time, I don't really think an ultra wide is going to be better. I've used an ultra wide before. I've used some curved monitors before, and right now I have my old monitor, which was a Samsung. I don't think it's an ultra wide, but it's pretty wide monitor. It's a 4K monitor, but it's only 60 hertz, and I have that tilted now. I'll show you guys in a minute. But that kind of gives me a great coding window, since that's what I do for a living. I'm a programmer. But then the main monitor, the Acer Predator monitor, just a huge amount of real estate. And I know people said in Linus Sebastian's Linus Tech Tips video, one of the reviews that I watched before I bought this monitor, they said, you know, they have to look up all the time. And another reviewer said that they kind of got a stiff neck from this monitor. Well, I've already used this monitor for about a week, and I've had 0 neck problems. I don't know if I just have like a deeper desk than they do, or if I just, you know, lean back and type, and maybe that's different than what they're doing. But from what my experience is with this monitor, I think it's great. And if you're going to buy an ultra wide, I went and looked at some of the ultra wides, and some of the ultra wides, if you have a price comparison, I think the Samsung CG9 or something like that, one of their really top end ultra wide monitors, it's like $1,500, and I don't even think the specs are quite as good as this monitor has. Like the 1 millisecond response time, the Gsync, the 144 hertz at 4K. It does have to use 2 display ports, which I'll talk about a little bit. Right now I'm recording this video through OBS, and I'm doing that in Linux. Now, I experimented with this monitor on Windows and on Linux. And at first, when I set it up on Windows, and it worked pretty much right away. At first, I was like, oh, I'm not going to use dual display ports. I don't really care about, you know, the 144 hertz. Well, the 144 hertz, you need 2 DisplayPort cables to use it. So I found that out. And also, when you only use 1 DisplayPort, it kind of gets washed out. And I saw some reviews on Amazon. People were talking about that. They're saying, oh, it looks washed out. They even showed pictures of it. But then when you go and you actually connect the second DisplayPort, the washed out goes away. The colors look really vivid. I mean, because this is an HDR monitor, so the colors look, you know, really bright. And yeah, so that was one thing that I saw that was kind of strange. But back to the ultra wide discussion with some of those other reviewers, they were talking about the ultra wide being a better monitor because you don't get the neck strain. Well, I don't understand that, because me personally, I just move my eyes and that's fine. I don't have to move my head in order to see with this monitor. I think maybe just because I have a deeper desk. And when I'm doing that, it doesn't really make sense to spend $1,500 for an ultra wide monitor just to have, you know, the top and the bottom slightly cut off. If you know what I mean, you know what I'm saying. It's like, why pay the same price or more to get less monitor? And that's kind of what the people were saying when you're advocating for ultra wides. I just think an ultra wide doesn't make a lot of sense, for at least for me. I mean, I would rather have the extra screen real estate, and if I have to, you know, move my eyes or turn my head slightly a little bit, honestly, I don't have to turn my head with this monitor at the spacing that I'm at. I have autonomous AI smart desk. I'm not sure on the exact depth of this desk, but I'll post it in the description. It's got to be, you know, 2.5 feet or something. Not super huge. But the only time I really have to turn my head when I'm using the 43-inch monitor is really to look over at my coding window, which is it's not a big deal for me. I don't mind turning my head. It's, you know, it's fine. It's not an exercise or anything. And yeah, so I'll show off the monitor. I'll talk a little bit more about some of the things that I ran into on Linux a little bit later in the video. All right.
Okay.
All right. So this is what the monitor looks like on my desk. It's pretty impressive, I gotta say. When you have a monitor that's this big, it's just awesome. It feels awesome to look at, and it looks crystal clear, perfect. Right now I have HDR turned off, and here's my Samsung monitor that I was talking about as well. It's kind of like my portrait mode coding window, basically. And yeah, this is just a normal size desk. I kind of have the end of the monitor leg stand just kind of, you know, off of it probably by an inch or so, but it's not going to tip over or fall or anything. It's on there pretty well, and I haven't had any problem with this monitor being like this. And I usually sit, you know, if I'm doing something leisurely about this far away, and I'm not having to tilt my head, as you can see. And if I sit really close, I still don't have to tilt my head. Now that might be something to do with the desk height. I do have this autonomous desk chair. You can adjust the height of your desk. So if you are maybe in a smaller chair, you're a bigger person, or whatever the case may be, maybe that'll affect you having to tilt your head and get a stiff neck. But I don't have that problem. I can see from there to there without even moving my head. So I don't know what those other reviewers were talking about, but for me, it's fine. Yeah, so that about wraps up this part of the video. I just wanted to show you the kind of dimensions of the monitor and the depth of the desk and how I sit and all that. But as you can see, it's fine. There's no problem. You don't need to get an ultra wide and cut off, you know, the bottom and the top of your monitor to have a good experience. All right, catch you on Windows. Okay, so I kid you not, I was in the process of recording this video and I was explaining a problem, and as I was explaining the problem, saying, this was the only problem that I had, and I tried to open up NVIDIA control panel, the whole entire system crashed. I lost the video, and I lost all my settings in OBS. I had a whole bunch of scenes and settings and filters for mics and all this type of stuff, and it all disappeared. So yeah, anyway, I'll go back to explaining what I was explaining earlier. Hopefully it doesn't crash on me this time. If you go to this, I think they call them Universal Windows program or whatever platform. On these applications, with this monitor, I kind of see some fuzziness when I'm scrolling around moving. I'm not sure if you can catch it on the video. But when I do this and I'm scrolling, the fonts look all weird. This doesn't happen in Linux. This doesn't happen in Firefox. It doesn't happen in Microsoft Edge. It doesn't happen in a lot of apps. And if I put this app, you probably can't see this either, but if I put it on my other screen, it doesn't have that problem. But it's only on this problem. So maybe the dual driver monitors have some kind of problem with these universal Windows applications where the fonts just look terrible. It doesn't look as bad when you turn it to light mode, but I tried to fiddle with the settings in all sorts of different ways, and no matter what I did, it just did not look right. It would always do that. Now, when you're not moving, it looks fine. You can read it fine. So, maybe it's not going to be a big deal, but if you definitely have some kind of universal Windows app that has some kind of similar, functionality to these settings programs, it might actually be a problem to be reading fonts off of this. Now, I guess I could try some other applications and let you know in the comment in the description. But from my experience, I don't really use these applications all that much, so I could still get away with using Windows and it wouldn't really bother me. But I just figured I'd mention that Windows has this problem. It doesn't happen on Linux at all with any applications. Yeah. But the only other thing that I thought I would mention is you can go to the NVIDIA control panel and you have to change it to 144 hertz. And I believe you can also do it in the display settings as well. Let me see. Oh, no. You have to use the NVIDIA control panel. And that's pretty much all I wanted to show you on the Windows desktop is those kind of weird fonts. I'm not sure if I picked it up on the video, but yeah. That's something you should be aware of if you're trying to buy this monitor. All right, let's go to the last bit of the overview of how the screen actually looks. I'll try to record it on my phone in 4K so you can get as much clarity as possible. Obviously, seeing it in person is going to be a lot better. I'll try to describe the difference in the video versus my own eyes if I do see a difference. Yeah. All right, so here's a look at what the monitors actually look like. I currently don't have the brightest setting turned on, but I'll go ahead and do that real fast. I just press that button. Right now I have it set to the user mode, but if you set it to graphics mode, as you can see, Windows kind of has a little bit of a freak out moment. Readjusts everything. And this is kind of common. I usually set it to Eco just because it's nice and kind of dimmer when I'm working during the day. But if I did want to, game, set it to HDR mode, this is what it looks like. So on the other screen, I do have it set to eye care mode, kind of the dimmer mode as well. But this is what it looks like. And as you can see, I'm trying to record it in 4K with my phone here. It looks pretty good. I mean, the colors are nice and rich. Obviously, the video is not going to do it justice as much as seeing it with your own eyes. But I'm not sure if you can see the kind of distortion with these universal Windows apps. I did play No Man's Sky, and I can show that real fast. Now, normally I play this with a controller. I click play on it. Let's see how it goes. If it's actually going to launch here. There we go. So yeah, there you go. You get a kind of an idea of what it looks like. I haven't played this game for long. I actually just started getting into this game, and from what I have played so far, it's a pretty interesting game. It's a fun game, although I do think it takes more of a larger time investment, and I don't know if I have that much time to invest into the game, so I'm not sure how much I'll play it. But other games like Star Citizen and things like that probably are really involved games, and I've seen the setups that people have for those games, and they're amazing. And yeah, this game is definitely fun. So now, right now, I don't have HDR. I think I only have this set at about 1080p, I think. Let's go to the options, check it out. Video options, yeah, 1080p.
So I have it on 1080p. I only have a 1070. Once I upgrade to the 3000 series, I'll be able to run this at 4K. It'll be a lot better experience. But I do have it set to the max FPS of 144 for 144 hertz, and it does use Gsync, and VSync is enabled. Yeah, so I did try to turn on the HDR, and I'll show you what happens. It just kind of, everything looks way too bright, and it looks really washed out. I'm not sure if this is picking it up on the camera here, but I'll go to game, and I'm sure you're going to be able to see it then. So yeah, in the game, it just looks kind of strange. Like the colors don't match up right, and things kind of look like in a weird light. It's hard to explain. But maybe this is the way that they want it to look in HDR, I'm not sure. But to me, this doesn't look right. So usually when I'm playing No Man's Sky, I will turn this off. Because it just looks awful. And I haven't gotten a chance to test it with any other games with HDR. But yeah, it looks a little bit better with HDR off, in my opinion. Kind of get an idea. This is about how big the screen is when you're sitting directly in front of it, and that's kind of fits perfectly into my vision. I don't have to, turn my head or anything. The camera basically picks it up. This is where my head normally would be. So but yeah, so I think this does it some justice, but obviously the colors look really good, especially with the jetpack there. Looks really cool. And this game in the darkness, just all the lights light up, and it just looks really good. Looks a little washed out in the camera, but I think it's picking it up decently well. So yeah, I'm gonna show you guys what this looks like on Linux. I don't think it's really gonna be any different, but I'll play a game on Linux just to give you a comparison. And yeah, from what I've experienced, it works great. I have pretty much zero problems on Linux. Windows has a little bit of problems now and then, like you just saw with if you change the settings with this little included remote, it'll kind of freak out, but then it kind of bounces back and everything is fine again. So for the most part, but yeah, it did delete all my settings in OBS and crash the computer for some reason when I tried to go to the NVIDIA control panel. But that's definitely not the display's fault. That's just a consequence of the display with the NVIDIA control panel, whatever, kind of strange things are going on in the background. But all right, I'll take you to Linux now, and we'll do another comparison with the game. All right.
All right, guys. So I wanted to quickly go over some of the settings that I found that you have to have. So it's a little bit different than a normal setup. Since it has the dual display port, you're gonna want to have, well, that's not the wrong. You're gonna want to have it set up in a replicate mode. Now, this is something I didn't even know existed, honestly. But as soon as I found out, it was super easy to set up, wasn't hard at all. And on Linux, I didn't have any problems. So now, as you can see, there's actually 3 devices that show up. There's the DisplayPort 0, that's my Samsung device. Then there's the DisplayPort 2, DisplayPort 4. So now, in order to get those devices set up, I had to say, I'll go to my second device or my 4th device. I had to say it's a replica of DisplayPort 2. And as soon as I did that, at first it kind of split the screen down the middle, and this was like when I went to my login screen, and it had two login screens, and I could actually go to each one of them. The one on the right was a little bit weird, like I tried to type and it wouldn't really work, and then I went over to the left-hand side and it worked perfectly. So, but then after I did that, I also noticed a little bit of jitteriness when I was like, minimizing or maximizing my windows. In order to fix that, I just had to make sure the refresh rate was set properly. Now, this is before I turned on Gsync, or they call it on the monitor adaptive sync. So as soon as I turned on adaptive sync, then it didn't really matter what setting I had for each of the monitors. But if I would go to DisplayPort 2 before I turned on adaptive sync, I had to set them to be both 120 hertz. And then once I did that, everything worked flawlessly. It would minimize really smooth. Like, I'm not sure if you can see this. This is running on a 1070, so it's not like the best, the newest, greatest video card, although I do plan on upgrading, and I will talk about that in a future video. It's still good enough to run both these 4K displays. I've benchmarked it with a couple other things on Linux, and it works decently well. Definitely not good enough to run games at 4K. It's the top of the line AAA games like Tomb Raider or something. But yeah, I just wanted to briefly talk about this option. Now I'm not sure how it works in GNOME, but in KDE Plasma, it worked great. Super easy, not a problem. Now I will mention one caveat, one small problem that I had, or two rather. The first being, this monitor is supposed to be able to do 144 hertz. Now the setting doesn't show up in here, but that's not to say that I can't manually add it or tinker with things a little bit more to try to figure out why it's not showing the 144 hertz option. But I haven't done that yet, because honestly, at 120 hertz, I'm pretty happy, but maybe later on down the line, I might want to fiddle with that just for fun. Now, the second thing is the monitor, when it goes off and turns on in Linux, it kind of has a little bit of trouble, at least with KWin. Now, I haven't tested this on GNOME yet, so maybe it's fine on GNOME, not sure. But on Plasma, if the monitor goes to sleep, it kind of kills the compositor for some reason. And if I have like a Firefox window open, it'll cut off part of it and then have like a giant black box in the background, kind of like where the border should be or something like that. So anyway, if you want to fix that, I'm sure I'm going to report a bug, and I'm sure it'll get fixed eventually. But if you want to fix that, you just have to go into your compositor, switch it from OpenGL2 to OpenGL3, and apply in between switching it, and it'll fix it. It'll work no problem, and you don't have to worry about anything. So that's my short little rundown of it working on the desktop. Now I'll take another video actually showing the screen in my workspace and everything, and I'll show it with Windows. So that's just one thing I wanted to mention about the Linux experience. And I was really surprised that it actually worked. I just tried it, expecting, hey, dual driver monitors probably not going to work. It's probably not going to be a good experience. But actually, it's been a pretty good experience. And yeah, I would say if you're using Linux and you want to have great screen real estate, like this image right here is a part of a project that I'm doing, Project IE4K, which is Baldur's Gate basically upscaled to 4K. And that's a 4K image in the background that I've upscaled with machine learning, and it looks great. And the whole entire screen is filled up. You can't see the other image. It's in 4K too, and it's on my Samsung. It looks great too. So yeah, that's the short little Linux rundown, and I'll take you guys around in Windows, and then we can get to the other stuff.
All right, guys. So here's on Linux. I'm gonna record a little bit of the desktop here. This is in HDR on Linux, and this is what it looks like. So as you can see, it looks very bright, and you can pick up a lot of the details. This is that same image I was talking about. I recorded the desktop. Now, When I recorded the desktop, I think it was at 1080p, so you couldn't really even see a lot of the details. You can go in really far. Originally, this image is like less than 1080p. It's like 800 by 600 how the game is intended to be played, and this has been upscaled to 4K. So it just looks great. And I can go into the NVIDIA settings, show you some of the settings. I don't have Gsync enabled right now, but it's compatible with HDR turned on. I don't usually turn that on. So I'll just quit out of that, and we can go to a game. We'll just go to Tomb Raider, since that's one of the best most visually appealing game on Linux, and also has a good benchmark mode. Now I'm in 4K. I have a 1070. Frames are gonna be terrible at 4K, but I can still show you the colors and how the monitor looks once it finishes processing the shaders for Vulkan. Now, when I turned it to HDR on Linux, I still had to fiddle with all the settings to get it to display properly, because the 2 driver DisplayPort situation kind of complicates it a little bit. So if you spend a lot of time switching things back and forth, you might have to create a script to automate some of the changes that you'll have to make if it doesn't, set it up perfectly on your system. All right, so continue anyway. Come on, hurry up. Play. So as you can see, I turned the light off back behind me so it doesn't have any glare. The screen looks very clear, and the colors are much deeper greens than what I think the video's picking up. Go look around and see. It looks really good. I think with this camera, the colors look brighter than they appear to me, if the screen is accurate with this video. But if we go to the options, go to display and graphics, and we just run this absurd benchmark that I'm going to get terrible FPS. So I'm waiting to upgrade to the 3000 series, as I mentioned. And once I get that, it's going to be a cakewalk to run this game. I'm assuming. If we can trust NVIDIA's announcement and their benchmarks, then it should work great. I really want to get the 3090. And yes, that sun in the image is very bright. This is a HDR 1000 nits, I think is what they call it. And it's very bright. I mean, if these trees were blowing in the wind, this would look very realistic. And with the fog moving, it makes it look pretty real with that bright sun. If some of these trees were moving, and these clouds were maybe moving with the shading of the sun changing with the clouds, this would look very realistic as a loading screen. I mean, it would almost look lifelike. So as you can see with this monitor, it looks very, very clear, very bright. The light spots, like, it's not as washed out as it is on the camera. the glow almost matches what it would be like in reality. It's pretty good. Just a second as it tries to reload. There we go. So yeah, I think you guys get the idea. Things look very clear. It's a very in this camera you don't get the size of this monitor. It's a very large monitor, but you don't have to worry about it being too large that you're going to get a neck ache or something. I think 43 inches is actually for me a perfect size for a main monitor, especially if you're going to game on it or if you're going to do any kind of work where you need a lot of screen real estate. This is really a great size. I'm glad I got this over an ultra wide. Yeah, we'll let this benchmark finish out its time here on its own, but the viewing angles are pretty good. They're not terrible. Can go around and look at it from different angles, and it's kind of like a TV where it's not too bad. You can see it if you're sitting dead on, obviously, but if you're looking at it from a diagonal angle, it's still going to look pretty good. So yeah, I'll end this video right here, and we can wrap this up. Okay, so I have one more thing I wanted to show you. I was messing around with the settings in Linux. When you're changing these quick settings from anything, this is what it does. In Windows, it kind of freaks out for a second, and on the other monitor, it'll change stuff. But as you can see on Linux, it's changing no problems. It's not freaking out. It's not doing a bajillion things, and it looks great. I just wanted to add that last little tidbit in there because I'm quite impressed with how Linux handles this display over Windows method.
Alright guys, so I just wanted to wrap this video up real quick, kind of talking about some of the features of the monitor and the price. Now obviously the price of this monitor comes in at $1,000, and for that price I think it's worth it. I do kind of wish it didn't have the dual driver thing, because it's kind of it's a pain. And I feel like it's an edge case that, as a software developer, I know that the edge cases aren't going to be as supported as well as what everybody else is doing. But from my experience so far, it's good enough, especially on Linux. I didn't really have too terrible of a time with Windows. It gives you a little bit of trouble, but once you learn the ins and outs of how to deal with the little differences and the little problems it might create, it's worth it for the faster refresh rate. Now with that said, when the new monitors come out that are 360 hertz with one cable, supposedly the new HDMI cables are going to be able to do 8K with only one cable. So that's pretty impressive. And I think that'll definitely be a bigger upgrade compared to this, but are they going to be 43 inches? Are they going to have all the same specs with this monitor? And the monitor is the Acer Predator CG437K. Now this monitor does come with a calibrated testing report, talks about all the colors and different things like that. I think I never look at these things because I don't care that much. But it did also come with, obviously I don't want the colors to be bad, but it did come with these little LED strips. And I think these LED strips are designed to be put on the back of the monitor, but they're magnetic, but then the back of the monitor isn't metal. So, and there's no like hookup slots to hook these up. So this just kind of feels like a crappy afterthought. And if they're trying to make this monitor out to be a more premium product, this just seems like an afterthought they shouldn't have done. With that said, you can hook it up to your monitor, and the monitor does support it through its interface in the controller, which I think can also integrate with some software when you're using Windows. But it also just will read in the colors from your video card, I think. So you could get a backsplash with these colors and kind of help the immersion, which, that it might be worth it. Okay, so I'm not like saying it's terrible, but I just feel like, for $1,000, they should have integrated this into the monitor. I shouldn't have to, connect 4 different LED strips to my monitor. You should have just put it inside of the monitor. If you want to include that feature, otherwise don't include the feature. It's a nice feature to have, and maybe I'll feel adventurous and want to install these on the back of my monitor with some sticky tape or something. But yeah, so it's there if you want it, but it's not that big of a deal. So anyway, I hope you liked this review going over the differences in Windows and Linux, and maybe some of the troubles you might encounter. Obviously, no product is perfect, but I think this is definitely pretty good, and it will satisfy your needs for gaming, definitely. And if you're doing some productivity work, it's going to obviously give you a ton of screen real estate. You're not going to get a neck ache. You don't have to buy an ultra wide and then get another ultra wide and stack them on top of each other and then basically have the same exact thing, right? But it's going to cost you $2,000-$3,000 or something. You can just get one screen and it'll do the same thing. Obviously, you're getting into the realm of the curved screens and things like that. If you're in for the curved screen, that's something entirely different. That's going to give you a kind of different immersion, and maybe that's better. That's arguable. I can understand that argument, but versus the argument that you should get an ultra wide over a larger screen like this, I consider this to be a way better form factor for my purposes anyway. So anyway, I hope you liked the video. Subscribe, like it. As I get more products, as I do new things, new projects, I will be posting more videos. Expect some more Project IE 4K for Baldur's Gate, and also expect some more general programming stuff coming out from me. Anyway, take care.